In Syria, the UK-based monitoring group said the prisoners were among 1,350 civilians and fighters ISIS had been holding in territory near the Iraqi border. The jihadists control a shrinking strip of land east of the Syrian Euphrates River around the town of Hajin, which U.S.-backed forces entered this month. The Syrian Democratic Forces, led by the Kurdish YPG militia, have battled ISIS there for several months with the help of U.S. air power and special forces. SDF Commander-in-Chief Mazloum Kobani said last week at least 5,000 ISIS fighters remain holed up in the enclave, including many foreigners who appear ready to fight to the death. ISIS's self-proclaimed caliphate has crumbled after different offensives across Iraq and Syria, although its fighters still operate in the desert border region and mount attacks. Now, here is the reality. So President Trump says that we've destroyed ISIS. We're done. Out. Goodbye. Catch you later. Adios. None of that is really true. Okay, it isn't. We have definitely degraded ISIS's capacity to control strips of territory, but we have not degraded their capacity to the ultimate extent to destroy lives, to create refugee problems, to reconstitute a caliphate. Barack Obama made this exact wrong move in Iraq back in 2010. You remember, you were there, when President Obama decided to rashly, in the middle of his first term, just like this, rashly withdraw forces from Iraq. All that happened was that ISIS ended up invading Iraq and filling the gap. According to the Wall Street Journal today, the U.S. military is preparing to withdraw its forces from Syria. People familiar with the matter said on Wednesday, a move that marks an abrupt reversal of the American military strategy in the Middle East. U.S. officials began informing partners in northeastern Syria of their plans to begin an immediate pullout of American forces from the region where they've been trying to wrap up the campaign against ISIS. The Pentagon has an order to move troops out of Syria as quickly as possible, said one U.S. official. U.S. military officials have refused to say what a withdrawal timeline could look like, but President Trump wrote on Twitter that he was going to get out of Syria basically now, as we referred to earlier. This, by the way, violates President Trump's central principles of foreign policy, which is do not actually telegraph to your opponent what you're about to do. Remember, a lot of his foreign policy is based on what he calls strategic unpredictability, the idea that you don't know what he's going to do on any given day, and this means that you don't want to piss him off because you may get a missile up your rear, right? But when you start telegraphing that we're pulling out as soon as possible, that's exactly, note for note, what Barack Obama did in Iraq in 2010, 2011. The move follows a call last week between Trump and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who has threatened to launch an assault on America's Kurdish partners in Syria. Erdogan steadfastly opposes the American partnership with Kurdish forces in Syria that he views as a terrorist force intent on destabilizing Turkey, but the U.S. has relied on the Kurds, as we mentioned, as the most effective fighting force in Syria against ISIS. Well, this follows hard on the news that apparently the Trump administration was seeking the possible extradition of a cleric named Gulen, who's an opponent of Erdogan's in Turkey, back to Turkey for possible imprisonment and trial. Okay, if, in fact, the Trump administration is contemplating a warmer relationship with Islamist Turkey, which has repeatedly quashed dissidents, which has arrested something like 100,000 people in the last couple of years, this is all bad news. I mean, these are, you don't want Turkey increasing its power. You do not want ISIS increasing its power at the expense of the United States moving its troops out. You don't want the Kurds to be decimated by the Turks and by ISIS. All of this is a mistake. The U.S. has long sought to reconcile two seemingly incompatible goals the president has sought in Syria. On the one hand, says the Wall Street Journal, Mr. Trump has pushed to withdraw all U.S. forces from Syria, where more than 2,000 service members are working alongside Syrian militants to defeat ISIS. On the other, he has embraced a strategy that calls for American forces to remain in Syria as a deterrent to Iran's expansive military ambitions. Officially, the U.S. military has no authority to battle Iran in Syria. Their mission has been to defeat ISIS and ensure the militant group that once controlled large swaths of Syria and Iraq is unable to regroup. That task is largely complete because ISIS has been cornered. Earlier this year, Pentagon said that ISIS controlled less than 2% of the territory it once held in the Middle East. And then he said this spring that he wanted to get, President Trump said in the spring that he wanted to get everybody out. But the pullout also comes amid abiding worries about the continued influence of Iran in Syria. And again, Turkey is looking to fill that gap. And it is unclear whether Turkey is actually going to do the job of checking ISIS or whether they are just there to kill the Kurds. So all of this is bad news. Now, this goes to a central question in American foreign policy, and that is, what is American foreign policy for? What exactly do we do when it comes to American foreign policy? Now, the typical answer in the olden days, and by the olden days I mean really in the World War II era, was you stay at home until somebody hits you, then you go in and you wreck them, and then you institute a democracy, right? This is what we did in Germany, this is what we did in Japan, and it worked to a certain extent. I mean, we had to keep troops there forever. I mean, we still have troops and air bases in Germany and Japan. We did the same thing in South Korea, right? We're going to put American troops there, and we're going to maintain troop presence until there's a safe and secure South Korea. Well, the problem is that there are certain parts of the world where this strategy appears not to have particularly taken root. Now, it's also true that the time period that we have given this strategy to work has not been all that long. It's not going to work in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is far too tribal. There's no history of democracy. It's a complete Islamist state. 99% of Afghanis by poll data support honor killings, for example. It's going to be very, very difficult to institute a Western-style democracy in Afghanistan. The same has not been quite as true in Iraq, where there have been the first stirrings of Western-style democracy for a while there. And if we were to leave troops in the country to basically pacify sectarian violence for a few decades, then probably everything would be okay. But we have lost our taste for this. We tend to think of World War II as ending the minute that we got a surrender out of Japan and a surrender out of Germany. But that is not, in fact, the case. We maintain troop presence across Europe until now, right? It is now, let's see, it's 2018. The war ended in 1945. So that means that we have been maintaining troop presence there for nearly 80 years. Right? For nearly 80 years, we've had troop presence in Europe and in the Far East. Okay, so do we have the taste for that anymore? I think the answer is really no. And that was proved by Vietnam. Because during the Vietnam War, if we had just stayed there, there would be a South Vietnamese government that was free today. If we had just stayed there in the aftermath of the Paris Peace Accords, instead of pulling out precipitously, there would be a South Vietnamese state today that operates very much along the lines of South Korea. But there isn't, because we pulled out, because the American people do not have the taste to keep troops in harm's way, which is really interesting and a little bit ironic, considering that we seem to have more taste for occupation and pacification for long periods of time when we actually had a draft in this country than when we have a volunteer military force, which is a very weird thing. The volunteer military force ended post-Vietnam. I mean, the non-volunteer military force, the draft, ended post-Vietnam. We haven't had a draft since, nor do we intend on reinstituting one. And yet, the taste for Americans to keep troops in these places is very, very small. Like, we don't have the appropriate level, I think, of understanding that American foreign policy does, in fact, require a lot of troops in a lot of different places. And it is also true that a lot of people who come in from outside of government, we've now had this with Obama. We had it with Bush in 2000, before 2001, by the way. When Bush entered office in 2000, he basically had the same foreign policy program as Obama and Trump, which is, let's bring as many troops home as possible. We don't need to be the world's policeman. Go back and watch the debates in 2000. This was the case that George W. Bush was making in 2000. It's even the case that Bill Clinton was making to a certain extent in 1996. So there has been this foreign policy consensus in rhetoric since the mid-90s, in the aftermath of the fall of the Soviet Union. Without an existential threat, America should bring home everybody within its borders and go back to the way things used to be. That's a misread on American history. The truth is, America has always had lots of troops in different places. That is particularly true in the post-World War II era. And then the policy ends up being, once all these guys get into office, they recognize that precipitous pull-downs of troops actually end up exacerbating violence and international conflict. Barack Obama, again, was an isolationist until he decided he needed to drone everybody in sight, because it turns out that in the absence of the United States, something fills the gap. There is no such thing as a power vacuum. There is just a state that has American influence and a state that does not have American influence. Now, none of this is to make the case that the United States should be seeking to, for example, topple the Syrian regime and set up a puppet government, or that we should be sending tens of thousands of troops to Syria. If you want to make that case, it has to be made more affirmatively. We'd have to have some actual good options on the ground in Syria, which it doesn't seem that we have. But at the very least, the sort of muddle-through strategy we've been using in Syria has worked in reducing ISIS violence. It has worked in reducing ISIS control of territory. And if we kept it up for a long enough period of time, it would work in reducing the refugee problem that's occurring from northern Africa, places like Libya, and also places like Syria. And that refugee problem does have an impact on the West. We've seen it in Europe, where it has tremendous domestic import for a lot of European countries, importing hundreds of thousands of migrants from the Middle East who may not, in fact, share the values of the people who live in Europe, who may have a different culture, who may not have any education. And all of this stuff is problematic. In other words, in an interconnected world, there are too many externalities to foreign policy to simply assume that when you withdraw the capacity to pacify a country, that nothing bad happens. That is the lesson of the last 20 years, and we refuse to learn it, and so we will keep learning it over and over and over again. I'm going to get into more of this in just 1 second. First, let's talk about how comfortable you are down below. This holiday season, as you rack your brain for the perfect gift, I have a tip for treating yourself and everyone on your list to mind-blowing comfort. It's Tommy John, the revolutionary clothing company that is redefining comfort. Tommy John has the most comfortable underwear for everyone on the planet. You can count on their products to be snug and neat and to stay in one place. How do I know that Tommy John products are awesome? Because I am wearing them on my beautiful behind this very instant. All of their underwear sports a no wedgie guarantee, which would have been awesome in high school, comfortable stay-put waistbands, and a range of fabrics that are luxuriously soft, feather-light, moisture-wicking, breathable, and designed to move with you, not against you. That means no bunching, no rolling, no riding up. So, if you're still on the fence wondering if Tommy John would be a memorable gift, think about all the discomfort you'll never have to endure or witness again. And with limited edition holiday gifts and daily deals, there's something for everyone on your list, naughty or nice. Give the gift of mind-blowing comfort this holiday season with limited edition holiday gifts from Tommy John. Save 20% on your first order at TommyJohn.com/Ben. That is TommyJohn.com/Ben for 20% off. I promise you, these things are really comfortable. Not only are they comfortable, they're extremely durable. Every time they go through the wash, they come out the same as they were before the wash, except clean, because that's what a washing machine is supposed to do. But when you get cheaper versions of underwear, I know, you put them in the washing machine, they come out, they're falling apart, the threads are... That's not what you get from Tommy John. These suckers last, and they are really great. I mean, they're really comfortable. So go check it out right now. TommyJohn.com/Ben. Use that /Ben, and you get 20% off. Go check it out right now. Great holiday gift. So the president saying that he wants to pull out from Syria. I'm not sure who's giving him this advice or why he thinks that it is going to be a big political win for him, because here's also the difference between the Trump administration and the Obama administration. In 2010, Barack Obama said, I'm pulling out. We're getting out. All right, we're getting out. Okay, so Barack Obama tried to pull out of Iraq, and things went bad. But he also had the press there to defend him. This is the nice thing about being a Democrat. You can pursue the crappiest policy, and the press will still defend you. Well, he promised he was going to get out, and then he kept that promise. Right? This was his shtick in 2012. We won in Iraq, and then we got out. Our troops are home. Okay, and then ISIS took over the entire place, and Barack Obama called them the JV team. You remember this? All of this was bad. But it didn't manifest. It was all clear in 2012, by the way, but the press decided to delay coverage of it until 2013. We were all told that ISIS was a JV problem. No one was worried about it until after Barack Obama's reelection. You think they're going to do the same thing for President Trump? Or do you think that if President Trump goes through with his withdrawal from Syria, and then the violence upticks, and suddenly you think those beheadings are going to stay out of the press with President Trump as president? Here's the reality of the press. The press covers Republican presidents the way that the press ought to cover all presidents. I've always said, I'm not against the press covering the president with a hawkish eye. I'm not against the press being on top of the president at all moments. I like when the press is on top of the president. I think it's good. What I object to is that they're on top of President Trump at every waking moment for everything that he does, pointing out the ramifications of all of his policy prescriptions. But as soon as a Democrat enters office, it's like they took ketamine. As soon as a Democrat comes into office, it's like they took a date rape drug, and now they don't remember anything about how foreign policy is supposed to work or how the policy actually hooks up with anything remotely real world. When Barack Obama does something and then people die, it's like, oh, well, you know, that just happens. That's the real world. And so he drones some people. And when Donald Trump does something and then people die, it's going to be like, look at President Trump. I mean, they're blaming President Trump right now for the death of a 7-year-old child thanks to custody and Border Patrol, even though Border Patrol tried to save the girl. They didn't cover for years Barack Obama's immigration policy in nearly the same way. That's not to say they didn't cover it at all. They did. They didn't cover it in nearly the same way. So President Trump can think he's going to get a temporary political win from this. He's not. The respite will not come. The only solution for Republican presidents is good policy. The solution for Democrat presidents is any policy, because the Democrats in the media will defend anything and everything. Okay, meanwhile, we have another controversy that has broken out regarding Tucker Carlson on Fox News. Now, let me preface this controversy by saying this. The left has now engaged not in boycotting, but in blacklisting. Okay, the reason I say they've not engaged in boycotting is because they're not actually boycotting products. What the left does is they find somebody they don't like, and then they decide to make a few phone calls to the advertisers on that particular program. And the idea is that if they make a few phone calls, then the advertiser will take it as though there has been a mass outpouring of rage at the advertiser for being on the particular program. And that's not the way advertisers work. Advertisers don't sit here and listen every day to the Ben Shapiro show. They don't sit there every night and watch the Tucker Carlson show and they go, you know what? I love Tucker Carlson. I'm putting my ads on his program. That's not how ad buying works. Advertisers go to an advertising agency. The advertising agency looks to see where there is unused inventory and how much it costs, and how many viewers they can get for what price. And then they go back to the advertiser and they say, for X number of dollars, you can reach X number of viewers on the following channels: Fox News, MSNBC, CNN. And that's how all of this works. So it's not like the advertisers are sitting there going, I approve this message from Tucker Carlson, or I approve this message from Ben Shapiro. That's not how any of this works. What the left has done is they have sought to destroy the marketability of political content they do not like by basically blacklisting companies by blacklisting the shows and then trying to blackmail the companies into not advertising on those particular programs. And let's not pretend that the left is honest about how they do this. Let's not pretend that the left is just seeing stuff they don't like, seeing stuff that is truly inappropriate and terrible and saying, we can boycott, because that's a bunch of nonsense. Joy Reid is still on MSNBC after all the things she said years ago. But Laura Ingraham was subject to a basic advertiser blacklist because she made a snide comment about David Hogg, a Parkland shooting survivor who was eminently political. You remember this. This happened a few months back. It was absurd at the time. Well, it's absurd when it comes to Tucker, too. I'll explain why in just a second. But the point here is this. An advertiser should know this. There is no actual advertiser backlash when you advertise on a program that half of Americans agree with. There is no advertiser backlash. It is a giant lie. I know it's a giant lie. How do I know it's a giant lie? I ran a company, well, it was actually a nonprofit, called Truth Revolt. It was specifically designed to counter Media Matters. Media Matters is a group on the left that astroturfs these quote-unquote boycotts that are not in fact boycotts. The reason I'm not calling them boycotts is because no one is avoiding buying a product from these companies because they advertise on Tucker Carlson. IHOP's business, IHOP pulled advertising from Tucker Carlson over the last 48 hours. IHOP's business was not in any way threatened by advertising on Tucker Carlson. The number of people who were not going to buy pancakes the next day because IHOP was advertising on Tucker Carlson was 0. And maybe it was 5. How do I, and we know this because the left tried to do the same thing with Chick-fil-A. You remember this. They tried to say that Chick-fil-A, because Dan Cathy, the owner of Chick-fil-A, is pro-traditional marriage, they tried to say, okay, we're all going to boycott Chick-fil-A, but it was going to be like an actual grassroots boycott. All that happened is more people went to Chick-fil-A. Advertisers are so afraid of blowback and publicity because all they want is to get their products to you, the listener. They don't want any association with any political view. But what the left is intent on doing is fundamentally destroying the market for politics. So what's going to happen? The end result is going to be that advertisers are going to be too afraid to advertise on any political program, and then all the profit margins dip for political programs, and political speech ends up withering away because it takes a budget to put on shows like Tucker's. It takes a budget to put on my show or Cenk Uyghur's show on the other side of the aisle. It takes a budget to do these things. So when advertisers are forced to disassociate from programs, specifically because the 3 idiots over at Sleeping Giants are angry at Tucker Carlson, all they're really doing is, in effect, quashing the ability of people to speak politically. Now, that's not a violation of the First Amendment because it's not government action, but it is a violation of the civil discourse that must exist around free speech if free speech is to prevail. If you actually want to see an open market for ideas, you have to not target advertisers for broadly advertising across a variety of programs. And we have advertisers on this program who also advertise on Pod Save America. That's great. They should. They should reach out to whatever audience they feel the necessity to advertise to, without me calling for a boycott against the advertiser because they advertise on Pod Save America, or without the folks at Pod Save America calling for a boycott against my advertisers. It's insane and it's ridiculous. It's even more insane and ridiculous when you look at the media coverage of this sort of stuff and when you look at the hypocrisy of a left that would be livid if people talked about boycotting their favorites. I'm going to get to that in just 1 second. First, let's talk about whether you are more Native American than Elizabeth Warren. So, 23andMe, now through December 25th, 23andMe DNA kits are on sale. I love 23andMe. I think it's a lot of fun. I took, personally, a 23andMe DNA test. It involved you basically spitting into a bottle and then sending it back to them. And then they give you all sorts of information. They'll tell you about your genetic muscle composition. Do you have the genetic muscle composition common in elite power athletes? Yes. Yes, I do. Sleep movement. Do your arms and legs twitch while you're sleeping? Or do you lie there like a dead person? Do you have cilantro taste aversion? Can you match musical pitch? Like, all these things have genetic components, and 23andMe can test for all of those things. As to the question of whether I personally am more Native American than Elizabeth Warren, the answer is no. I am 100% pure Ashkenazi Jew. 100%. I mean, it's hard to find that level of purity anywhere in the world, but look at me. I mean, I'm just a big bag of Ashkenaz Jew. It's amazing. And I found that out because 23andMe, but 23andMe can uncover all of your genetic. It turns out that our Hispanic makeup artist Jess is related to me. She's 0.4% Ashkenazi Jew. So that's really exciting that she's like my 10th cousin. In any case, 23andMe can give you all this fun information. It really does make a fun holiday gift. Now through December 25th, get 30% off any 23andMe kit. Order your DNA kit at 23andme.com/Shapiro. That is the number 23andme.com/Shapiro. Again, that's 23andme.com/Shapiro. And you get that special deal now through December 25th. Get 30% off any 23andMe kit. Go order that DNA kit right now. It's a lot of fun. It's a great way of giving the gift of genetic discovery to parents and siblings and aunts, grandparents, everybody else on your list. It includes 90-plus personalized genetic reports offering those DNA insights. Go check it out right now. And you may, in fact, be more than 1,024th Native American. You can find that out at 23andme.com/Shapiro and then send your results to Senator Warren. Okay, so the Tucker Carlson controversy, with all those preliminaries out of the way, here's what the controversy is about. So Tucker is very, very anti-immigration. He's not just anti-illegal immigration, he's anti-immigration. He thinks that the influx of foreign workers is undermining our wage base. He thinks the influx of foreigners into the United States is changing our culture. And so he made this comment on Fox News about the immigration crisis. This is from December 13th, him talking about the caravans and people crossing the border illegally.
Our country's economy is becoming more automated and tech-centered by the day. It's obvious that we need more scientists and skilled engineers, but that's not what we're getting. Instead, we're getting waves of people with high school educations or less. Nice people, no one doubts that, but as an economic matter, this is insane. It's indefensible, so nobody even tries to defend it. Instead, our leaders demand that you shut up and accept this. We have a moral obligation to admit the world's poor, they tell us, even if it makes our own country poorer and dirtier and more divided.
Okay, so it was the comment, poorer and dirtier and more divided, that people decided to take out of context. So there's two ways to read that. One is the way that schmuck Michael Avenatti read it. So Michael Avenatti, who can always be trusted to have the worst take on any possible situation, tweeted out, if an executive or employee at any of the Fox News advertisers called a fellow employee dirtier or poorer, they would rightly be fired. This isn't about free speech. It's about racism and bigotry. Tucker Carlson must be fired immediately and the advertisers boycotted. Okay, so first of all, I love when people say stuff like this isn't about free speech. It's about racism and bigotry. Free speech includes a lot of stuff you don't like, Michael Avenatti. Free speech includes a lot of stuff that you may not personally approve. Now, I disagree with Tucker Carlson on immigration. I mean, we had a full Sunday conversation in which we talked at length about immigration. So I tend to be much more libertarian than Tucker is when it comes to immigration. But there are two ways to read those comments. One is the sort of, well, they're brown people coming in, and so they are dirtier or something. Okay, that is not what Tucker meant. What he actually meant was clarified on his show the next day, right? He went on and he said, what I mean is that when people come from places that are poorer and they don't have educations, so naturally our country is now getting poorer because more poor people are entering the country. And when he said our country will get dirtier, he didn't mean because it's going to be browner or something. What he meant is that a lot of the people who come in who are poorer may not actually be in the habit of keeping their cities clean. And he makes a reference to Tijuana. He says, well, Tijuana is dirtier and poorer. Okay, that's inarguable. It's inarguable that Tijuana is dirtier and poorer than Los Angeles. Right? These things are just inarguable. People decided to read this in the worst possible way. Why? Because there's a motivated group of people who want to take Tucker Carlson off the air. Let's be real about this. This is not a bunch of good faith folks who have decided, you know what, I am so offended by that thing that Tucker Carlson just said that now I've decided his advertisers must pay. This is a bunch of people who are sitting there waiting for a comment that they can take out of context so that they can then go after people they already don't like. This is the game. We do it on Twitter too. Right? The game is that you find somebody you don't like and then you find a reason to ruin their life. Not you see something you don't like and then you say, wow, I can't believe that person said that. That's terrible. We should do something about that. If you think that sleeping giants in media matters, we're sitting around going, Tucker Carlson, no real opinion on him, but what he just said is so bad. That's nonsense. They were sitting there watching every night, waiting for Tucker to say something they could take out of context and then portray as so egregious that advertisers would need to bail. And again, I don't blame the advertisers because the advertisers are just doing what they've been trained to do, which is if you get 10 complaining phone calls, you escalate it up the management chain, and then you withdraw the advertising because these advertisers can pay a little bit more money and they can advertise in other places. But what we are watching right now is a blacklisting of conservative shows by a bunch of people on the left and astroturfing of resistance to advertisers that doesn't actually exist. If you think somebody's not buying a Bowflex because Bowflex appears on ESPN and MSNBC and CNN and Fox News, you're out of your mind. How do I know this? Because how many people actually care about a Bowflex ad on Fox News? Probably the people who watch Fox News, who generally are going to agree with Tucker Carlson. How many people who watch CNN care about a Bowflex ad on Fox News? Probably none, because Bowflex is probably also on CNN. Nonetheless, Nautilus has now pulled ads from the show. They're not the only ones. Smile Direct Club has pulled ads from the show. There are 10, 12 companies. Pacific Life said it would pull ads from the show. They said one of our ads appeared on Tucker Carlson's show last night following a segment where Mr. Carlson made a number of statements regarding immigration. As a company, we strongly disagree with Mr. Carlson's statements. Our customer base and our workforce reflect the diversity of our great nation, something we take great pride in. Okay, why do corporations have to take political positions on immigration? Why is this even necessary? They provide life insurance. What the hell are we talking about here? It's the same thing with IHOP. IHOP was like, this violates our corporate policies. Really? I thought your corporate policy was basically making crepes. I thought that was your... Forgive me if I thought that boysenberry syrup on pancakes was your corporate policy, not how the border wall fight should go. But this is what the left wants. Their goal here, again, is to, in fact, quash debate. That is their goal. Now, again, I'm not saying this is a violation of the First Amendment. It is not. It is not legally actionable violation of the First Amendment. It is, however, destroying the basic bargain that we all have to hold if we are going to have a market-driven exchange of ideas. Because this is not the market in action. This is a bunch of motivated leftists who have decided they're going to scare the hell out of advertisers with nothing to back it, and a bunch of advertisers who are just playing at risk-averse. That's all this is. And advertisers should know that, by the way, for every boycott that is pulled like this, for every attempt to pull from Tucker Carlson's show, there will be more blowback on them from the right than there would have been blowback on them from the left for being on Tucker's show to begin with. Fox News has issued a statement on all of this. Their statement is correct. The statement is, we cannot and will not allow voices like Tucker Carlson to be censored by agenda-driven intimidation efforts from the likes of MoveOn.org, Media Matters, and Sleeping Giants. Attempts were made last month to bully and terrorize Tucker and his family at their home. He is now once again being threatened via Twitter by far-left activist groups with deeply political motives. While we do not advocate boycotts, these same groups never target other broadcasters and operate under a grossly hypocritical double standard, given their intolerance